Hey guys, it's Frederik of the FWX podcast, and I'm gonna do another timeline explanation video here. And the franchise I want to talk about this time is one that I'm gonna tease to you by just giving you some of the pictures here. And so I'm going to talk about the Fast and the Furious franchise and exactly where all those movies lie on a timeline. And we'll do that in a moment. And also, one of the things I will be talking about is like the escalation of things. Because one of the things you notice is that they start very local until they become like global and even crazy enough outside the globe. All right, let's get to it. But first, I want to inform you guys that you can like this video. You can also subscribe to the channel and the podcast. That really helps us out. And that way we become more available to people who like this kind of content, especially when I'm talking here with Fast and the Furious about uh, blockbusters, stunts, a lot of the great um, A-listers or incredible performances. And by that I mean like stunt work and fighting and a lot of the talents that really come to mind when it comes to the Fast and the Furious franchise. And I'll mention here already that for some this might seem just like a very amusing, very fun franchise, which I believe it is. But I think that in order to believe those things, you kind of need to watch with your brain not on and just enjoy it for what it is. Yes, I think a lot of people take it way too serious. And so you can actually look at these movies with your brain maybe just turned half on. Okay. So I talk about those things a lot. I talk about action franchises, superheroes, and also a lot of story things, characters, world building, character building a lot. And I do that on the channel a lot. You can check the channel for those videos. And of course, you can share this with friends and family, or maybe your colleagues at your work, or just here online. And you can comment away in the comment section down below. And I hope you do that in a friendly and polite way. And finally, I'm not a native English speaker, so if I get something wrong, or if I mispronounce something, or if I lose my train of thought, that is perfectly normal. That is human. We all do it. So, also, I don't mind being corrected by about something. You can put that in the comments down below as well. So here we go. Let's talk about the Fast and the Furious, and I'll be doing this in blocks because I do believe that the different movies are part of a. They're all part of a wider franchise, of course, but they're like separate blocks to explain this larger story. Okay, let's get to it. So I'm down here. You can still see me. Let's talk about Fast and the Furious. One thing I want to mention here first, as we're going to Wikipedia, is that this, in some way, is actually an adaptation. Specifically, that very first movie, this one, The Fast and the Furious, which sets up all the characters that we have. But what I want to mention about this is that this is based on a magazine article called Racer X. It was on Vibe, and this is an article from 1998 by Ken Lee and written by Freeman, including a well-known person, David Ayer, a filmmaker known for action-heavy projects. And as it stands right here, the first four movies are especially about street racing that culminates into the film from 2009. And after that, we go to heists and espionage. And that's what I mean with those blocks of movies that I talk about, is that they're kind of self isolated into becoming um, a mammoth of a franchise. Yes. Okay. I'm gonna fix something quick before moving on. So, again, down here. So, let's talk about those first movies. We'll start with The Fast and the Furious. And this is the very first movie from 2001. This, interestingly, is only an hour and 46 minutes, and it sets up all the characters. So let's go over the stories for a moment. So I just gave you a little overview here. Here we have the information. So first off, we start in LA when we meet Brian O'Connor. You will know him definitely. Very well known for especially this franchise. And by the way, RIP, because years ago he tragically lost his life. While, if I'm not mistaken, while filming the franchise, one of the movies. So we meet up with his character, Brian O'Connor, who is an Angelino who works for the Los Angeles Police Department, and he has to go undercover in the street racing world because there's been a lot of hijacking happening. We'll see if we get some from the pictures here. And he gets introduced to that world. We get to meet those characters. We get to meet Dominic Toretto, played by Vin Diesel, of course. It's, by the way, not his real name, it's his stage name. And stage as in all of it, and not just movies. And so, in the very first movie, Brian gets an in through his LAPD background of also kind of being a bad boy, a pretty white bad boy. And here's a good photo of all the people involved. So obviously we have Brian in the middle, Dom next to him, then Dom's sister, Mia, right here. And then there's another character here that we meet later that's a bit more in the background. That is Vince. And so Brian gets an in with the group. He meets them. Get back to the story here. And he has to investigate a group of truckers that are being hijacked. And the the suspicion falls on Dom, who is a professional street racer himself. And we get a lot of drama in the group. And I want to speak a moment longer about the actors here involved. So obviously, Paul Walker, Vin Diesel. You have Michelle Rodriguez, who plays Letty Ortiz, who is the partner of Dom throughout the series. You also have Jordana Brewster, who is who plays Dom's sister Mia. Then a couple of more actors, including this one, of course, Matt Schulze, who portrays Vince. And then there's a few more characters. I want to mention here for a moment, back to me for a moment. So, in one of the more recent movies, I believe it's in Fast 9, we get a flashback towards what happened with his family, and that Dom has started this life of illegal street racing because of something that was happening in his family, because their father, because it's because there are three kids. It's Dominic, Mia, and Vince, and there's some like Dom cares a lot about family. That is the main through line through this complete franchise. And initially, it was just about the family itself, the Torettos, and they used to do uh, bad boy, bad girl kind of stuff, bordering on illegal. There's actually good moments from. I'm trying to remember. It's not a flashback, but it's like a talk exposition moment where we get all that info where they were stealing. Ah, it's actually from the 10th one. So from a character, I'm gonna explain in the last parts of this video probably. But I'll segue it, just a little here. Um, so like I was saying at the beginning, I'm gonna be talking about these blocks with the movies. So I think the first four, like I was explaining there, are very much local, take place in LA for the most part and around LA. And obviously, a huge part, of course, is that I have to talk if with the car stuff is that there is a lot of moving stuff, obviously, because the thing I understand from these movies is that you can't go anywhere in especially those parts of America without a car unless you're really uh, determined to take the bus or something, but nobody does. Uh, so you kind of get to a point when you're a youth in America where you need a driver's license, I'm thinking, and that's kind of like the only way of getting anywhere when you're a teen becoming an adolescent. Adolescent, it's a word I sometimes struggle with. Anyway, let's continue here because I wanted to say all of that because it's an important part here. I'll read that blurb for a moment from this movie. A spate of high-speed robberies in Los Angeles brings street racer Dominic Toretto and his crew under the LAPD scanner. And Brian goes undercover and befriends Toretto in a bid to investigate the matter. Let's briefly get into that story for a moment. Ah, there's the mistake. So it's a joint task force, LAPD and FBI. That's why it's put like that on. Yeah, okay. I'm not gonna completely read this, guys, because I don't want to be that guy who's just telling instead of just showing. Okay, so that's basically where this ends. Is that there's a lot of drama between this group, especially with Brian thrown in there. And if I'm not mistaken, he the family, the Torettos, learn eventually of his police background. Yes. Okay. So that's number one. That leads us to obviously number two. I got it doubled in here. My bad. Gotta fix something for a moment. So that was in 2001. I'm assuming the timeline is similar here. So then we go to Too Fast, Too Furious from 2003. Also almost 2 hours long. And this leads us to a Brian centric story with some interesting new characters that I'll be talking about in a moment. So Brian now lives in Miami and he teams up with Roman Pierce, who is played in this movie and the franchise by Tyrese Gibson, who is an old friend of his, a strange old friend. And Brian is still very much in his cop life, but now he has to go undercover for another agency, and that is the Custom Service, back when it was still Custom Service, and not the ugly ass agency that it is now, where they're deporting people. And let's talk about the actors in this for a moment. So obviously, Paul Walker and Tyrese Gibson take the lead in this movie. You get a few more actors in here, like Devon Aoki as Suki, Cole Hauser as Carter Verone, who is the villain in this movie. Eva Mendes plays a role in this. You got Ludacris, who plays Tesh Parker, now and later in the franchise, and then a few others. Uh, so there's a kind of a deal made between Brian and let's actually get into for just a moment. I'll read this snippet right here. Ex-LAPD officer Brian O'Connor and his ex-con friend Roman Pierce, who transport a shipment of dirty money for shady Miami-based import-export dealer Carter Verone, while secretly working with undercover agent Monica Fuentes to bring Verone down. So Miss Eva Mendes is another agent that works with the two of them, and the ultimate deal is for the erasure of their criminal records. Let's go over that quick. And obviously, a lot of chases, a lot of action scenes. And it ends with Brian and Roman staying in Miami, where they open a garage together. And they're funded by a little bit of cash that they took for themselves. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Like I said, I don't want to be that guy who was just reading off pages. That's not interesting for you guys. Basically, what it comes to is just a Brian and Roman centric a background movie so we know more about them, and that involves Eva and Ludacris and a few others. I have expected those two DJ, that DJ duo that's also part of the later movies, as the working hands people to be in this movie as well, but they're not in this. That's gonna be in a moment. Okay, let's talk about the next one, and that is I'm thinking Tokyo Drift. Yes, Tokyo Drift from 2006, and this introduces another character that we meet. That is Sean Boswell, played by Lucas Black. He, if I'm not mistaken, used to play Gambit on one of the X-Men movies. And we get a couple more interesting characters, especially people that I don't really know a lot about. I think the most important ones to talk about here in this movie, though, is Sung Kang, who plays Han Lu, and Brian T as DK. Let's get into it for a moment. So, this one takes place obviously in Tokyo, where we meet up with Sean Boswell, who's a car enthusiast uh, who went through, who also went through a bit of a bad guy phase, and so he has to go and live in Tokyo with his dad. And I'm gonna get to me for a moment. So, if I'm not mistaken, the movie actually begins with that sequence of Sean showing off what he can with a car, and they get him in trouble. So that's why this is all happening. And so he goes to live in Tokyo with his dad, so he can stay out of trouble. And stay out of trouble, being out of prison. And he finds his moment. And yeah, so basically, this is yet another background in character movie for Sean, who does get something of a cameo in one of the more recent movies in Fast 9, along with a few others in this movie. I will mention that later. So basically, this is an interesting part of setting up the characters we're going to meet later. So, like I said with at the beginning, the first four are really just set up for later. We meet the Torettos in the first one. We get to know more about Brian in the second one. And then we learn about Sean Boswell, who's also part of this franchise. On the lower part, he's one of the more low key characters. But what they, I think, brilliantly did is put them in a different place, because that allows Sean to be the, the black sheep of the movie, basically. Okay, let's continue here. So that's the reason why they're doing this with these first four, and then that comes to I have a double it here. Okay, and then we get to Fast Four from 2009. I'm gonna get that a bit different, so I get the info here. So this involves already a bit of a coming together. Okay, so now Brian is working for the FBI, and he returns back home to LA in this movie, and it stars the people I've talked about before. Let's get to an image here. Here's a decent one. That's from later though. Let's get another pic here. From the next movie. Let's just get to this one. Although they're in black and white here in the background, it's Dom, Brian, Letty, and Mia as the main cast for this movie. So, like I was explaining, or telling the story rather, is that Brian returns home to LA. He's now an FBI agent, and he has to do what exactly? He has to work with Dominic because some more drama happens. Trauma, or actually tragedy happened because unfortunately Letty has seemingly been killed, and so they investigate that, and they learn about a, a guy named Arturo Braga. Let's get back to the page here. Let me get to the cast for a moment. So, and here we also meet another person that is important later on, and that's Giselle Yashar, who works for Braga, played by Gal Gadot. Obviously, people will know her. I'm not going to talk about performances here. And then we have also the DJ duo with Don Omar, if I'm not mistaken. Let's check that out for a moment. So, he's a rapper and a singer songwriter. Let's actually check that out for a moment. DJ duo in Fast and Furious. Ah, so the guys I was referring to are Tego Calderon and Don Omar. That's the guy I just showed. They play Leo and Santos, and again an iconic reggaeton duo from Puerto Rico that appear in many of the movies. Okay, I wanted to mention that because they're very much the working hands. A lot of the, I wouldn't say just trivial things. Talk about another important person here in a moment. I thought maybe there was another person here to consider. Okay, uh, back to this. And what we learned from Braha is that he was running drugs in LA, and Letty got into that circle, and unfortunately that got her killed. And so Brian and Dom go in and investigate that. We get just an incredible moment. This is in another place where they're getting something. Like I said, there's a lot of stunts in here. This is one of those from the that movie. Another pick of Mia. Yeah. So that's basically like an accumulation movie of what is happening. So it reunites all those characters together as a revenge plot as they infiltrate the cartel that was responsible for Letty's murder. And it takes place in LA and in the Dominican Republic as well. And this is where things really turn. I'm gonna get the knee for that. Where these build up. Yeah, you can kind of see this like the MCU a little. Is that we got those interesting first people that are part of this group in their separate kind of movies almost. Not with a trilogy in this case, but just in appearance. The Toretto's, Brian, and then Sean Boswell, who becomes important later. And so that gets to this moment where things become bigger. And they can really get into, again, like I was saying, the overarching theme is about family, but it really gets to how far are you willing to protect your family and to have it all. And to have it all meaning loving each other and being there for each other. That's what this series is about. The series of films, I have to say. Okay, let's continue with the next movies. Okay, so there was the first four, and then we get to actually another one that's kind of relevant here, Los Bandoleros. Here's where those two, that iconic duo is part of. Tego Calderon and Don Omar as those two characters. Back for a moment. Oh my god, I can't believe it. So something I did a reference before with Tokyo Drift because this pick did not do him justice enough. Sun Kang is Han, by the way. I wanted to mention that for a moment because that pick of him was just not clear enough. Yeah. So Han is another important character in Tokyo Drift that I did not talk about in that movie because he's kind of like a mentor figure for Sean in this, but he also appears in Los Bandoleros along with the others, and I think this is kind of like an early coming together movie. And it says here in the snippet, the crew reunites in the Dominican Republic to break Leotego out of prison and hijack gas shipments. Ah, amazingly enough, this was not made by one of the many usual directors because Vin Diesel directed this movie. From what I can read about the ratings here, is that it did kind of half. But yeah, I kind of see this as like an early coming together, gathering the group, gathering the crew moment. So that leads us to Fast Five, where things really break out. And this was also one of the movies that I watched in preparation for talking about this franchise. Let's read the snippet here first. So, Luke Hobbs, a federal agent linked to the U.S. Diplomatic Security Service, follows Mia, Brian, and Dominic, seeking to detain them as they strategize to steal $100 million from a corrupt mogul. That's the short part of it. And that leads us to Brazil, obviously. And so we get this movie with the cast, with the group, and this includes also a few other characters, including Elena Neves, a police officer who works for the Brazilian Police Department in Rio de Janeiro. Also important here, Elsa Pataki, Spanish actress, is also the wife of another huge action star, Chris Hemsworth. Speaking of action stars, probably one of the biggest action stars there is, pun intended, is of course Dwayne The Rock Johnson, who starred in many of these movies, and he, as far as I know, had a decent hit with The Smashing Machine. And from what I've heard, that's a pretty good movie, which was initially going to be maybe a make or break for him for maybe getting an Oscar, amazingly enough. So he appears in this movie as his DSS agent, Luke Hobbs. And we get to meet up with the crew again, too. Let's get to that story, actually. So Fast 5 takes place in 2011, and like I explained, we meet up with the group in Rio de Janeiro, where they are planning to steal from a corrupt businessman who basically owns everything there, Hernan Reyes. I want to point something out for a moment here with, sorry, this one. There's another cast member here that I want to reference for a moment. Here he is, Joaquim de Almeida, who plays Reyes. I saw him in another action movie, uh, The Hitman's Bodyguard. He plays an official there too. He might be, what's the word? Gas typed. Anyway, and while I have the group up here with the characters, there's a scene in the movie where they decide to actually do that and have everyone come together. And I want to mention for a moment, as I'm cutting back to me here, is that I made a video about what it is to have a found family that is also highly specialized. It's all about the crew. You can check that out above or after you've seen this episode. It's all about people specializing and coming together and being well-rounded characters, which is what those first few movies did for the characters. When with the Torettos, their side characters, and also including the other leads like Sean Boswell and Brian O'Connor, played by those actors, of course. So while Los Bandoleros is kind of like a little pre-start to the group coming together, in Fast Five we actually get to that point with all of them, and they do have that point where uh, Dominic and Brian talk about we need a team, and so they explain, or Dom explains, we need someone who's good with technician and cameras and stuff, and for that they get Tesh Parker, played by Ludacris. They need to have someone that can talk themselves out of any situation. That's Roman Pierce, old friend of Brian's, who has a really big mouth. You also have someone who's good with weapons and knows their know-how. That's with Giselle. You're gonna need someone to get in and get their hands dirty. That's Don Omar and Tego Calderon in their roles. Santos and Leo. You have to have two people that can really professionally drive. That's themselves, of course. And I'm guessing that Mia fits into like an overview, like a manager kind of role. That's where she fits in. Also, important part here, as they're being chased by Dom, uh, as Dom, Brian, and Mia are being chased throughout the favelas in Rio de Janeiro. We get that big announcement that was kind of already talked about earlier, is that Mia is actually with Brian's child. And that's kind of part of the familia thing of staying together and being and doing better. Yes. And that leads to an interesting point near the end of the movie. I'm forgetting something. Another character, of course, important for the group is Han. Han is kind of like a chameleon who gets in and out. It blends very well. You can make the best of any situation. We also meet up back with Vince, who is moved out of LA and now has a family of his own. He's got a kid with Rosa, played by Jamie Osorio. I hope I pronounced that right. Yep, get back to this. So that's what Fast Five is about. It's really the accumulation of the past four movies. Sorry, five movies actually, with Los Bandoleros as well. Although it's a bit more of a spin off, to be honest. And it's one of the better movies of those first six movies. And like I said at the beginning, this is where things really turn as this almost starts to become family versus family. And they're being pursued by Luke Hobbs, as I said. And there's also a mid-credit scene, by the way, as Eva Mendes appears for a moment, talking with Luke Hobbs, actually, to talk about something that I'm gonna talk about now. Why do I still have this here? I already had that. So then leads us to Fast and the Furious 6 from 2013, as we learn new things. I'll read the blurb for a moment. Hobbs is tasked with catching a team of mercenary drivers who manage to evade him every time. However, he enlists the help of Dominic and his team in exchange for full pardons for the past crimes. That's what it comes down to. And that gets us into my neck of the woods in Europe, specifically in Britain, with all the characters that we've met so far, and then a few others as well. We'll talk about that in a moment. Back to this. So, Fast 6. Team has to do a mission in exchange for amnesty for their past crimes, as Luke has to take down a group led by Owen Shaw, a former special ops operator in Britain, played by the incredible Luke Evans. Another interesting and side character comes a little bit more known later on is Riley Hicks, played by Gina Carano, who is Hobbs' assistant in this movie. We get the cast back. We get to see that actually This other group is basically like a parody of the family itself. And actually, Roman Pierce's character, Tyrese Gibson's character as Roman Pierce, actually has that joke in the movie, of course. It's like we're battling our mirror selves with, and it makes a joke about Brian being the prettier blonde. That's all these actors next to them. Veja, Klaus, and then Ivory and Adolphson, and then these two in the corner down here below, Kudos and Oaks. And of course, Braga also appears in this because seemingly there's a link with Shaw and Braga, which leads us to scenes with Brian as he goes back to LA and confronts Braga, who tells him that Shaw has people everywhere and that they should be careful with everything. And at this point, also important to that is that Brian and Mia now have a baby together, a baby boy, if I'm not mistaken. Gonna get to that moment for a second. Their son, Jack. Yes. Okay. And then important, of course, that I don't just want to say because I saw it mentioned there. The important part of this is that Letty is part of this rival gang, and she's actually not really dead. But that, and that's part of that Braga sequence that we learn in the prison, where here's a good shot of all of them together, actually. Here's a good shot of all of them together. And so it turns out that Braha learned that Letty was still alive and got her involved with this new group, with Shaw and his group that seemingly seems to parody the family itself, uh, or found family at this point, although there's a big part of that as well, of course. And so the quest becomes to convert Letty back because she doesn't know anymore what happened. And I'm actually going to cut back to me for a moment because this is something that seems to come back in a lot of action movies is that getting clocked really hard in the head gives you memory loss. And that comes back in a lot of franchises. I think of Jason Bourne, for instance. He also has a identity crisis, quite literally, because of it. It appears in that first Avengers movie where Natasha really clocks Jeremy Renner's Hawkeye in the head to loosen him up. That's another thing that we see a lot in these action movies. So, some kind of tropes that seemingly seem to help, but from what I've heard, and I know I mentioned them a lot, apparently the or my friends and cinema therapy, especially Jonathan, has explained that in their movies that actually that is kind of true. That seemingly a knock, a good freaking fist to the head loosens you back up, makes you more uh, lucid. Okay, let's get back to what I was talking about here. So, Fast Six ends with converting Letty back to the group and the death of another character, or a few. In the process, however, Gina Carano's character and Giselle get killed. And also, part of that is that Han, who had been together with Giselle for some time, also there's a bit of a fast cameo with Rita Ora, who has a cameo in this movie because it's based in London and she's a Brit, of course. Yeah, let's get back to it. So I explained this all around. Now we go to number 7. And this is widely seen as one of the best movies in the franchise, Furious 7. And then we get also a bunch of new characters here. I kind of see this movie, Furious 7, as. Gonna get to me for that. I kind of see Furious 7 as like the Age of Ultron Avengers movie for this franchise, in that we get another accumulation movie with the group, but then also with some interesting new characters as well. And we'll get to that right now. Amen. All right. So I'm down here. Obviously, Furious 7, highly emotional movie because of the untimely passing of Paul Walker. Let's read the blurb here. So Dominic and his family are caught up in a quagmire when Shaw's brother seeks bloody revenge. They must not only deal with their enemy but also save a crucial program from falling into the wrong hands. Yeah, and that program is not just any program, it's a surveillance program called God's Eye. Here's a good shot of the group. They all appear at moments. But then I want to mention those new people, of course. Let's get to the cast. So first up, we get the normal crew. We get our villain, the brother of no, it's the other guy's name again. Owen Shaw, played by Luke Evans, has a brother, older brother, also a serious British badass, played by Jason Statham, another fantastic action star who used to be an operative for the British Special Forces. We later learn in another movie I'm going to bring up in a moment is that he used to be part of, I think it's called Black Company, like high, um, like an elite operative Black Ops team that he used to be part of. And then, so that's the main villain basically. There's a few others in here as well. We get Jimon Hunsu, in my opinion, one of the most hardworking actors in all of Hollywood, who plays Mosey Gigandi, a in the movie he's seen as a warlord. Another interesting character that's very vital for this story, of course, is Ramsey, the person who seemingly made God's Eye, played by Natalie Emmanuel, who you will definitely know as Miss Sunday from Game of Thrones. And we also have a role for Ronda Rousey as Kara, who is the bodyguard leader of one of the people that they need to go after, named Safar, played by Ali Fazal. There's another interesting character here, another villain, uh, Louis Tran, played by Tony Ya, the martial artist, who is also incredible. Another interesting and important character here is Mr. Nobody, a yeah, let's be honest, just an older official who works for a company named the Agency. That is not the CIA, by the way. This is an kind of an independent but very elite black ops company that works with the government, with who are trying to get the God's Eye surveillance program so they can use it. But at first, one of the important things that happens here, actually, since we got that picture of Han here, at the very end of number 6, we see that Jason's character, Deckard Shaw, starts to go after the group. And that starts with an end credit scene in number 6, by the way, where he goes after Han in, I think it's Tokyo. And this movie starts, of course, with the attack of Shaw in the DSS headquarters in LA, where he goes after Hobbs. He crippled my brother. He says something similar to that. What else is important here? Danny Trejo is in this. Some things don't make sense here. Anyway, uh, yeah. So I have the idea back in my head. So Furious 7 is basically like a reverse revenge plot for Deckard Shaw as he goes after the group because they crippled Owen Shaw. I'll mention something else I'm seeing here at the end. I'll get to that. Where are we here? All right. So, like I explained, last appearance of Paul Walker as Brian O'Connor. Ah, hold on. So it says here from the ending of Tokyo Drift, but I was explaining with Shaw going after Han because Dom goes to Tokyo to actually talk to Sean Boswell. And there's actually, I want to say this to you. There's a specific phrase, the sins of the father followed me home, that Dom says as he's calling with Mia. Oh, by the way, also important, she also says that she needs some more time, and she says, how about another 9 months? How about another 9 months? Because she's having another baby. And so while the group goes gallivanting after Shaw to not only go after him, well, specifically they go after the God's Eye so that they can find Shaw and exact some revenge of their own. Yeah. So this movie is basically one big revenge plot between the two groups. Okay, let's get to the rest here. So next movie, of course, is The Fate of the Furious number 8. Fate's being a good play on 8. Now let's read what's happening here. Dominic's idyllic life with Letty is interrupted when he is coerced by Cypher, a mysterious cyber terrorist, into betraying his family. The crew must now find Dom and Cypher before she unleashes chaos. And according to the ratings, this is a decent movie. And this starts off in Cuba. It does say something similar just here on the page itself. Working for her tournament against the others. I want to mention, of course, people who are in this that we haven't seen before. That, of course, includes Cypher, played by Charlize Theron. We get scenes in a prison where Dwayne Johnson's Dwayne Johnson's Hobbs is put after they are taken out for the first time by Dawn, and there's a there was a word I wanted to mention here because they're anyway, and then also gives us the assistant to Mr. Nobody, Mr. Little Nobody, played by Scott Eastwood, another action star. We get to meet some of the team of Cypher, includes Connor Rhodes, played by Christopher Hivju, who you will also know from his role in Game of Thrones as Tormund Giantsbane, and some other roles as well. Interestingly enough, he was also in that Red One movie with Dwayne Johnson. I wanted to mention that briefly. Okay. Uh, we also meet another character kind of linked to the agency, Queenie, played by the incredible Helen Mirren. Someone that I haven't mentioned before because she's really not that uh, important to the plot here. It's Samantha Hobbs, Luke's daughter, played by Eden Estrella. So another important person here. Nope, not really. And this takes the group to all around the world again, from Russia and New York. There's a big sequence in New York, of course, and a couple of other places as well. Cuba, like I said at the beginning. Oh, there's a sequence on the plane that I want to mention for a moment. Here's some of the. There's a sequence. Yeah, I kind of want to put a spoiler in this to talk about it because it's an incredible sequence. As we see that this is part of that sequence. I'm gonna finish things up here. Uh, Although it is kind of relevant to one thing. So, like I was saying, Dom is captured by a Cypher. He has to help her, and that leads to him knowing an important factor here is that Elena has been taken by Cypher as well. And in the meantime, she has given birth to Dom's baby, uh, Brian Marcos Toretto, which we're seeing pictures of here, right here, at different ages with moments, because there's photos in here from the last movie. And so at the later parts of the movie, the group is splintered off into yet another family, the Shaws, as they're kind of part of this family in some way. Actually, that reminds me of an earlier moment where where is he? Deckard has this moment earlier as they're meeting all together for all the info, the exposition moments with Mr. Nobody and Little Nobody. And Deckard says to them, "Listen, I ain't a part of your family, okay?" That's not exactly how he says it, but it's damn close to what he says. And the reason for that is because Cypher also intended to go after the Shaws because they have the skill set to actually do stuff, while Dom and his crew have a lot of experience when it comes to doing things to serve your family and those you love. Well, the Shaws really have a lot of professional experience when it comes to espionage, because that's what we dip into with these movies, with 6 to 10. Like I said, it's parts, impacts. There's another moment. It's kind of blurry. But that leads into that moment from this movie where Deckard and Owen, who actually seemingly is kind of healed, are brought into this. And there's an incredible fight sequence, shoot and fight sequence on the plane of Cypher as Deckard has gone after little Brian Marcos Toretto. And it's the funniest thing with this sequence especially. It's so cute and super fun. It shouldn't work, but it does work for me personally. Okay, and that leads into the next movie. And also one part of this is that um, so you see a lot of photos here from the Hobbs and Shaw movie itself, which I will reference in a moment. But it kind of breaks open in eight. Here it is. There's a lot of prison photos. There's a whole prison sequence even with Shaw being in the same prison as Hobbs, following what happens as Dom broke the group, broke the crew, and leading to Hobbs getting into that same prison as Shaw. That he put Shaw in because there's an end credit movie. There's an end credit moment where Hobbs puts Shaw in the prison, and now we get the reverse, and we get that incredible sequence of the breakout as we get to see that. And I also have to say myself, and of all the movies that there are, I'm gonna actually come back to me for that. Of all the Fast and Furious movies that there are to be seen, this is, I think, my most watched one, and I love it. There's a lot of action in it. There's a lot of fun in it. It's all about family, of course, but it's also very fun. And yeah, like I've said from the beginning with doing this podcast, I love talking about action because it informs the characters a lot, and it really shows not just what a character's style is like or what their motivation is, and the wardrobe is a huge part of that as well. Uh, and also when you think about when it comes to prisons, because that's also another trope and a kind of style that we see a lot with action movies. Because oftentimes there's a lot of sequences with prisons, and we get to that point. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna try and cycle through the rest of these movies because there's two more to talk about. Well, three. So, like I said, with Hobbs and Shaw in the prison in Fast 8, that leads us, of course, to Hobbs and Shaw itself. So, this is after Fast 8. I'll read the blurb here. US agent Luke Hobbs and British mercenary Deckard Shaw are forced to put their rivalry aside and work together to stop a genetically enhanced supervillain. And for that, I'll just get the cast here together because I basically said all what I needed to say about this movie already. But there's a whole lot of action that you just kind of have to see for yourself, basically. And so it starts in many different locations. Of course, we get Hobbs, played by Dwayne Johnson, and then Shaw, played by Jason Statham. And then the villain of this movie is Brixton Lore, the genetically former British Special Forces operative, played by the incredible Idris Elba. We get another family member in here that is Hattie Shaw, played by Vanessa Kirby, who is the person that gets the MacGuffin in this movie. The MacGuffin being, let's get to that info actually. So Luke and Shaw team up with Hattie to battle that villain who threatens the world with a deadly virus, like usual. And then we get a couple more interesting characters as well. We get someone that Shaw was involved with, Madam M, played by the very beautiful Isa Gonzalez. We get another background character from Hobbs's background. That is Victor Locke, who works for the CIA, played by Ryan Reynolds in this movie. Queenie also is part of this, of course, because Queenie Shaw, because she is Queenie Shaw and linked to the agency, like I said before, played by the stellar Helen Mirren. Then we get a whole bunch of actors who are the extended family of Hobbs, who is originally from Samoa, and also another cameo that is sort of important that I haven't fully put everything into, and that is Air Marshal Dinkley, played by Kevin Hart, who has befriended Dwayne Johnson years ago on Central Intelligence, a movie they did together. Another important person to talk about here. You get Rob Delaney as Agent Loeb, who is Victor Locke's CIA partner. Yes. And that's basically it when it comes to Hobbs and Shaw. Yet another end of the world, but we need to come together kind of movie that, again, like before with those first movies, really sets up the background and the experience and the family kind of vibes of these new characters. With one notable end, of course, as the Shaws team up with the Hobbs to slay Brixton. One more thing I want to say that I didn't mention enough, or haven't mentioned a lot, is that there's also a lot of great music in there. I'm gonna get to me for that. Uh, so for almost every movie, there's incredible music in the background, obviously, but for Hobbs and Shaw, there was some work with some of the most well-known rappers and actors together. Ludacris actually did some music for some of the movies as well when it came to the music, along with the DJ duo that I mentioned, Don Omar and Teo Calderon. And then also, that's, by the way, in the seventh movie, as Shaw is exiting the hospital and narrating to his brother at the same time. And what I also wanted to say here for Hobbs and Shaw specifically, Idris Elba, besides being an actor and being a lot of other things as well, is a rapper and a DJ himself as well. And he made a song for that as well. And I really, really like that song myself. Okay, let's get to the last two movies to talk about. That leads us to F9. Let's read what we got here. Dominic Toretto is forced to put his retirement on hold when Cypher, the dangerous cyber terrorist, escapes with the help of Dominic's estranged brother, an international terrorist. That's basically all you need to know about that, actually. And let's talk about the characters here as well. So, yet another great team up movie. It actually complete. I'm yelling here. I'm sorry. Another huge team up movie, and this time with everyone in the franchise. So the crew itself, with Dom and Letty, Mia also appears in this as well, and then the family Toretto is completed by another brother, Jacob Toretto, played by WWE Master John Cena, long lost estranged brother who has been doing some dangerous end of the world kind of stuff. Then we get the rest of the team with Roman and Han and Ramsey. Queenie also appears again. And we learn here something as well is that she, like them, has a group of her own that includes an all female group. And I wanted to mention this at the very, very end, but there's potential projects being made for for instance, a complete female driver movie in the Fast and the Furious sphere as well. Okay, let's get to the last parts here. So that also includes Tej again. You get to see Cypher again. And two of those female team members are Anna Sawai, who plays Elle, and Cardi B, who appears in this movie as Lisa. If I'm not mistaken, there's a song that Cardi B works on that we hear in this movie as well. Another person that we haven't heard of here is Michael Rooker, who you will know from several action and superhero-based movies as Buddy. Speaking of another Buddy, or rather Bad Bunny, who plays a character in this as well. We get some more background here as well, um, because we get Jack Toretto, another family member who you will know from other stuff. He's in High Potential, for instance. The fellow September is a young Jack Toretto. Yeah, so everybody reappears for everything here. You got Twinkie returning. You get smaller versions because we get there's another flashback scene in here that I wanted to mention where we get the very motivation for Dom. I'm actually gonna get to that to me for that. So, like I was saying, there's a flashback moment that is supposed to tie everything together to the very start of the franchise, where because unfortunately, Dom, Mia, and Jacob's father unfortunately dies during a track because he used to be a professional racer too. That's what Jack Toretto person was. In the flashback, we get to see what happens. Okay, let's get to this. So everybody returns in this movie. Almost everyone. And also, here's one of the crazy parts. For the first time, and this is where I understand where they are absolutely going crazy with this franchise. There's a space sequence where they have to go and blow up a satellite in space. And that for me too is a little bit too much. And I think they understand that now because my understanding with the last movie, there's going to be in Fast X Part 2 or something like that, to tie everything back up. They're going to bring it back to the more original stuff and make it like an emotional event, basically. Because even for me, this is a lot. In a movie all about cars and family and coming together and all of that, this is the craziest shit that they have done so far. Although they do have that moment, because it's you don't see it well in this movie, but it's Tej and Roman in this, and in universe that's kind of funny, but also iconic because you get two black men in space, which in universe will be a cool thing to have, of course. Okay, let's finish this up with the last movie, Fast X, the other movie I watched to prepare for this as well. Let's read the blurb here. Over many missions and against many impossible odds, Dom Toretto and his family have outsmarted and outdriven every foe in their path. Now they must confront the most lethal opponents they've ever faced. Fueled by revenge, a terrifying threat emerges from the shadows of the past to shatter Dom's world and destroy everything and everyone he loves. And this has also an impossible big cast, including some people we didn't know about before. Obviously, the usual crew with Dom, and then Lenny, and Han, and Roman. Uh, Important here to say is that ever since his untimely death, Brian does not appear again in these movies. But then we also meet a couple of other actors in this new franchise, uh, who are new to the franchise. And that includes the new big bad Dante Reyes, son of Hernan Reyes from Fast Four. Excuse me. Yes, Fast Four. There he is. So Reyes had a son years ago who is kind of crazy, and that gets talked about in the latest movie. Not this one. And he's played by the charming Jason Momoa, who, once again, like the previous movies, is on a revenge quest to destroy the crew slash family. And we get to meet a couple of more actors. We get to meet yet another Toretto, Abuelita Toretto, played by Rita Moreno. And we get to meet another family that is involved with the agency. And also important here to mention is that many of these people are either working for or not working for the agency. So the crew have done a ton of a ton of missions for the agency that includes the people from the agency, like Little Nobody, Scotty Eastwood, who appears. That also includes another we learn another that we learn later villain, Ames, played by Mr. Reacher, Alan Richson himself, and then another huge, big star. Brie Larson plays Tess. She's the daughter of Mr. Nobody. And if you actually look it up online, you actually learn their names. And it's actually Petty, like the artist, that their last name is like. So those are a couple of the new ones. There's another one that I didn't mention here, and that is yet another family member of some kind, Daniela Melchior, who plays Isabel Neves. You'll know Daniela from her several superhero roles in James Gunn related work, and that's kind of all that need to know here. Uh, in some way, everyone reappears in this movie, including another cameo from Pete Davidson as an underground kind of person. Another person returning is Diogo, played by Luis da Silva Jr., and that is where I'm gonna end it. With the last thing here. So a potential next movie that we're gonna get is for 2028. So we're gonna have to wait for a good long time again for the end of the franchise, and everyone is gonna reappear in this as well. Something I didn't mention here with the last movie here. Um, I think there's a picture of her somewhere here. One final thing I want to say about this movie: there's another cameo, seemingly not important to the plot, but just for the sake of being respectful towards families going through stuff. The daughter of Paul Walker has a little cameo as a flight attendant here. So Meadow Walker has a flight attendant moment to pay honor and be respectful towards that family. Yeah. So she's not here in the cast where I can find her. But what I wanted to mention here, get to the cast. Some way, somehow, Giselle returns. There's a ending here where we get to see Michelle Rodriguez's character, Letty, after being put away and after shack up with Miss Cypher, they get to the surface of a black site in, I think, Antarctica. And there they're meted by Giselle coming out of, I think it might be the the submarine that Cypher was trying to get in the Fate of the Furious movie. So somehow Giselle survived what happened to her. I'm guessing in the same kind of vein that Owen Shaw did. Where is he? Here he is. So Owen, at the end of Fast and Furious 6, seemingly dies. Is supposedly killed, but we learn actually that he's just like in an artificial coma or something at the beginning of 7. Like I said, with that music part, the song Ludacris did for this movie as Shaw is walking out. But here it is, Ludacris. Um, I'm gonna be honest. I'm kind of looking forward to this movie. Although it's gonna be some time, let's actually talk about the future of this franchise for a moment. So we're gonna get Fast Forever in 2028. There's possibly a sequel for Hobbs and Shaw happening called Hobbs and Reyes, which will be between Jason Momoa and Dwayne The Rock Johnson in their roles from the franchise. But that is still up to whatever's gonna happen. Just that female-led movie, the spin-off that we're gonna get, and this already has a couple of screenwriters that might be happening. And then there's another interesting standalone film that it might happen or not. Okay, that's kind of it. So, guys, uh, we're here at the end. So, thank you very much for watching this episode of the FWX podcast. Before I go, a few more things. So, obviously, you can like this video if you want to, if you like this episode, and you can also subscribe to the channel in this podcast if you like this kind of stuff that I'm doing. This was one to explain the timeline of the Fast and the Furious franchise. It took a while, but we got there. Of course, it's a while because there's 10 freaking movies and a bit more with those spin offs and the potential new movie coming up. Although, like I said again, it's going to be some time for that, and but we'll get there. And so you can also share this with friends and family or your colleagues at your work, or maybe just here online as well. You can comment away in the comment section, but I do hope you're polite and friendly and kind when you do that. And talk away about whatever you want. It's about to get wild. And with that, I mean, you can talk about a ton of stuff about the franchise here when it comes to. I didn't mention a lot about the cars. Uh, that's maybe because of me, because I'm not a huge car person myself. I do like watching them. That's about it, though. Just like with these movies, I love watching them. I talk a lot about those things here on the channel when it comes to action, movies, franchises, genres, a lot of the character and story building and world building as that. And also, I love doing this. I love doing the podcast, and I think we'll end it there. So, guys, this has been me, Frederik, for the FWX podcast, and hope to see you guys in an episode soon. See you then.